things on the right side and the wrong things on the wrong side.
Cosine equals 87 divided by 105, the square root of 105.
I mean, I can't always be their little girl.
The passage into adolescence, signaled by dramatic changes, marks the beginning of the end of childhood. Teenagers begin to look, sound, and behave like grown-ups. They become more aware of the wider world and how their actions affect that world. With intellectual maturity comes the powerful potential to reason logically and think abstractly.
Q minus P is equal to PQ. So you do 10 minus 6, 16 minus 8, and 9 minus 14, and the coordinates are 4, 8, and negative 5.
And what you will see is that this round has boiled down to basically 3 different issues. The first being topicality, the second being the counterplan, and the third being the solvency arguments. We all have to live and share in this world, and if we are to live together, then we have to kind of function as an effective society, and we can't just say it's the other people's problems, it's everybody's problem.
Puberty, the biological transition from childhood to adulthood. In most cultures, puberty and the period we call adolescence go hand in hand.
Puberty is not synonymous with adolescence, but it does tend to mark, the onset of puberty tends to mark the onset of adolescence. And often, of course, these changes start to take place before we as adolescents are aware of them. And the initial changes are very subtle, and they are hormonal.
Pubertal development refers to the sexual maturing of the young person toward the end point in the normal course of development of being capable of sexual reproduction. But sexual reproduction is not the only issue. Pubertal development also means a tremendous change in the size and shape of the young person's body.
And of course, socially, they are expected to behave in the way that they look. So if they are physically mature, they're expected to be socially mature and intellectually mature. And of course, this is a tremendous pressure to those adolescents who mature physically much earlier and much more quickly than they do intellectually or socially. Boys, of course, when they mature early, tend to inspire confidence in their parents. Girls, when they mature early, tend to inspire fear in their parents. When parents see their adolescent girls blossoming, they start thinking of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to her?
With growth comes more responsibility and higher expectations in every arena.
For physical development, there is a nice milestone for the onset of puberty. For cognitive development, it's harder to find a single milestone that marks the onset of adolescence. Much of adolescent thought, if you will, is a refinement, continued refinement of the kind of thinking skills we've seen in middle childhood.
Pioneer psychologist Jean Piaget theorized that children develop their thinking in stages. During middle childhood, for example, children tend to think about the world in a very straightforward way, a phase Piaget called concrete operations. Adolescents, on the other hand, enter a new phase.
So when young people attain adolescence and what Piaget calls formal operations, they attain a new level of mental ability, and now for the first time they're really able to think about their own thinking.
If one is looking for a characteristic of adolescent thought that marks it as different from the thinking of middle childhood, adolescent thought seems to be more abstract, focusing on the system into which abstract concepts fit. So we have different kinds of thinking about moral issues, different kinds of thinking about the way the physical world works, less focus on simply understanding what is, more focus on understanding what might be.
Because they're young and they're very concerned with their own bodies and all the changes and those things happening and the changes in their emotions and feelings as well as the physical changes, they make a characteristic error, which is to assume that other people are thinking about what they're thinking about, namely themselves. And I call that the imaginary audience. Imaginary audience is the young adolescent's belief that other people are watching him or her and thinking about them and are concerned with him or her. And that can have very positive motivational properties. Children and teenagers can begin thinking about performing in Carnegie Hall or playing on a major team, and that can motivate them to try very hard.
Now, there's one drawback to this creative thinking and advanced logical thinking, and that is you can start to imagine troubles coming and disasters coming and so on, because you can follow a sequence like this. What if I don't get in a good college? Or if I do get in a good college, what if I flunk out? If I don't flunk out, what if I don't get a good job? If I do get a good job, what if I don't get promoted? If I do get promoted, suppose I get a bad wife and I end up in a bad marriage and my kids are bad. And so you can begin to authorize and think out the future and imagine things that have a low probability of happening, but it gets out of hand. So creative thinking is a mixed blessing.
In addition to the audience and thinking about thinking, adolescents can also think in abstractions. They can really begin to think about possibilities and contrary-to-fact ideas. So they can begin to think in historical time, and they can think about celestial space, and they can understand metaphor and similes. It's a very different level, and I often say that the curriculum at the school-age level really teaches children, makes the unfamiliar familiar. They're learning all about foreign countries, and they're learning about measurements and concepts and so on. But in adolescence, once they get formal operations, they learn the curriculum then changes, and it makes the familiar unfamiliar. So you go into chemistry and you learn that water isn't water, it's really H2O, you know, and you go to literature and you find that, you know, Gulliver's Travels is really not just a good story, it's an allegory, you know, and you find, so that in algebra you find that letters just don't represent sounds, they represent numbers. So much of the curriculum then at the high school level really helps young people discover the unfamiliar and the familiar, which is a whole different level of thinking.
Not all agree with Piaget's assertion that each child's mind develops in predictable stages, especially during adolescence, when individual interests and abilities vary widely. While new experiences do challenge the mind of the adolescent, full development of formal operations is not a certainty. Why do some teenagers move ahead with their intellectual abilities while others lag behind? To answer the question, one must examine both the inner thoughts of teenagers and the outer world that helps shape them.
I've been interested for a long time in what helped girls and boys progress to the highest levels of cognitive skill. What other variables, what contexts, what parental or peer or social variables influence them so that they may or may not use their cognitive abilities to the highest level.
Whose turn?
Your turn.
Mine? Got any aces, Gary? All right. No, I didn't.
High school students and their parents were interviewed to examine some of the factors that influence career choice.
So to start with, what do you think that you are going to do after high school?
I'll most likely go to a junior college like RCC, and then later on go to a four-year college.
A four-year college. Do you have any idea what your major will be?
Not really. I like to get into maybe law or business. I always heard my parents or my aunts and uncles and my grandparents talking about politics, and my uncles are always lawyers, and they're just always talking about it, and I find it interesting.
He's got two uncles who are very successful in their chosen career, and I know that that has been an influence on him because he's seen what money can do for him. But they also are very happy within their careers, and so he knows that that's also very important.
Got them all.
While role models may influence achievement, the flexibility and support of the immediate family remains important.
As a parent, I see different people out there doing different things and different careers. And I think, well, this guy's really doing well, he's successful, should my son do this? I think that depends upon him. Whatever he picks, I would encourage him to pursue it to the best that he can.
The well-known impact of peers on a teenager can be a developmental advantage under the right circumstances.
I like to tell parents to get their pre-adolescents and young adolescents into positive peer groups. Well, how do you do that? Athletics, drama groups, whatever the child's interest groups are, you can move them into that kind of peer group, and that's a positive peer group that is teaching discipline, motivation, aspirations, setting goals.
7, 8, turn, 2, 3, 4.
You say, what are your goals for 5 years from now? You might as well have arrived from another planet. They just haven't ever thought about goals from 5 years, and it's tomorrow and then tomorrow. So there are lots of ways that positive peer groups can influence a child to think about goals and motivations and compare himself in positive and not competitive ways necessarily with his peers.
Remove 5 drops from each. You remove 5 drops from each while they are hot.
Up until the graduation from elementary school, we see boys and girls really doing very well and very similarly in all sorts of subjects, including math and science. You enter junior high and something happens to the girls. They begin to lose their self-confidence. They become unsure of their ability in math and science, and they start veering away. I can't do that. That's not me. I'm much better over here in history or English. One of the things that we see that's really important is the role of the fathers. Fathers for girls especially seem to be a freeing influence. If dad is saying to you, you can do it, whatever you want to do, you can do it, then you do feel empowered that you can go on and do whatever it is you want to do.
So you take the magnitude of 1 times the magnitude of b, a times b, times the cosine of the angle.
Male teachers can have a devastating impact on a girl who's interested in math and science just by seeming to ignore her or not respond to her questions or to make it appear as if she's silly or she's in this class and it's not appropriate that she be in that class. And if more teachers would make more of an effort to get the women involved in a cooperative way instead of a competitive way and encourage them, I think we could have more girls feeling better about their mathematical and science abilities. We used to have the Protestant ethic that sort of said, just keep plugging and you'll make it. And I'm not so sure that that's as salient to kids now as it used to be. They think everything ought to come reasonably easily, and if they really have to work hard, then they're not good at it, and they don't want to do it. And what we need to say is, you can do it, and it's important, and put in a little time and effort, and you can succeed. And then, of course, the success will be that much more meaningful if they put in some time and effort and say, wow, I can do this.
Advanced thinking, seen in math and science, plays a role in other arenas as well.
Carefully scrutinized. Almost a century ago, the court referred to the political franchise of voting as a fundamental political right because it is preservative of all other rights.
I think what the kids really like about debate is that it's that one-on-one combat. It's that intellectual combat. It's the, I can think of this and use this and you can't. And you can't figure out a counter for my thought. And I think that's really what excites them.
The dependency disadvantage, death disadvantage, and the gentrification disadvantage.
What are you putting all this under?
Significance, the case.
Okay. I don't think we're going to need to use that because all that evidence is used under the counterplan, and once we introduce that evidence in the counterplan in the 2NC, I could bring it up and say cross-apply it to significance.
Okay, as long as you do that.
Gender seems to play a role in how adolescents debate. But does this reflect a difference in ability?
They have to prove that you cannot do both at the same time, and that's going to be a major issue with you. The permutation proves that you can count the homeless people and give them voting rights at the same time. And if you're able to do both, then it shows that there's no reason not to adopt the affirmative plan.
Thinking abilities, they both have. Over time, both boys and girls have been successful for me and successful in other places. Sometimes the boys get a little more involved in the combat aspects, and the girls want to get into the finer points. But I don't really see a tremendous difference.
Though gender does not appear to influence intellectual ability, clearly age does make a difference.
There's a real difference between a freshman and a senior, and it's not all physical maturity. A lot of it is the ability to analyze these things, the experience, the fund of knowledge. And I'm not talking about debate knowledge. I'm talking about the fund of real-life experience, the classes they've been through, and kind of building that intellectual base. So the debate skills, you could teach somebody that in 3 months. The intellectual skills take a few years. Unfortunately, some kids dabble and they come in for a while and they leave for a while, so I don't see them over long term. But if somebody stays with it for long term, like some of the kids we've seen recently, they become more relaxed with their abilities. They become more confident. They know they can think these problems out and they can solve these problems and they can think about these things in a very, very analytical way.
I think you have to exemplify a lot more on that and make it very clear to the judges that this is a major voting issue inside of solvency.
I think what happened was that Matt and I, we diversified our arguments in such a way that we were not able to keep them in one central view, so that when we were coming back in our rebuttals, we merely argued individual impact issues rather than winning the disad.
Kids just blossom when they get involved in some of these things. And sometimes they're the kids not in the highest levels, identified in the highest levels in the school. They get out there and they blossom and they start thinking about issues and they start reading outside sources and they start doing these things. And I really think that's great. And I want kids to have those opportunities, and I think they're good for kids.
With the ability to think abstractly, teenagers typically develop a deeper sense of moral reasoning.
And a man named Dante Alighieri, he's the one who's going to take us on a guided tour of the Inferno. He said once that lying could be more serious than murder. Think that makes sense?
Yeah.
Why?
Murder, you could die immediately, but suffering, you suffer with that lie forever.
For years.
And everyone suffers with that lie, and it hurts more people than just that one.
Once you violate the trust of somebody, it's very hard to get back. And if you do it a lot and lie a lot, you're really violating the trust of yourself.
In the 1950s and 60s, psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg created a widely accepted model of how moral reasoning develops.
The basic theme in Kohlberg's theory is our thinking changes. How we solve moral dilemmas changes from pre-adolescence to late adolescence. So that if you start out in pre-adolescence, children are most concerned about the consequences. Why should you not hit another child? You should not hit that other child because you will get spanked. That they are concerned about the consequences of their behavior. At the second stage of moral development, and there are 6 stages, children are concerned about what's in it for me. How can I get my point over? Right is what pleases me. So if you see a boy and a girl talking, the boy does not love the girl, and he knows good and well he does not love that girl. But he's interested in having a romantic sexual encounter with the girl, so he starts to tell her how much he loves her, how much he cares, gives her flowers, and so on. And that's right, because right behavior is what pleases me and gets what I want. That's called the marketing orientation.
I've learned that if you want a job, you lie, because I recently applied for a job, and I was honest, and that I stole a hood ornament when I was 13, and I did not get the job because I had told the truth, and their policy was that anybody who had ever stolen anything was not hired. And so what it tells you is that they are working with a bunch of liars because everybody's stolen something.
Stage number 3 is the nice guy, nice girl orientation. You make decisions on the basis of what the group will accept. You go along with the program. You be nice and go with the flow. And right behavior is that which pleases others. Number 4 is law and order. Why should you not steal? You should not steal because you'll go to jail. Law and order must be maintained at all costs. Stage 5 and 6, as we move to late adolescence, are more toward the realization that moral standards are developed through group dialogue.
Okay, in the 60s, there was a lot of conflict between generations. Like, my dad was totally against the war, and my grandpa, who fought in World War I and in World War II, was totally for it, and they fought a lot. And so he didn't get his decision about the Vietnam War from his parents, from his father or his mother. He got them from his peers and from the way the rest of the society felt.
And then finally, stage 6 is that moral developments are made on the basis of abstract concepts. Truth, justice, fair play, and so on. So what is right is not so much then what is the law, but what is the truth, what is justice, what is fair play. And children's cognitive thinking has to develop before they can get to the last stage.
If we don't think the world is worth living for, or we don't feel like we're good enough to live in it, our morals are lower. And if we think of ourselves as good, we're going to have high morals and we're going to change the world in some good way.
I think moral development of children is an essential concern that parents have. They really want their children to grow up to be morally competent and autonomous.
Hey, we can settle this! We can settle this!
The real-life problems that kids face day by day are the ones that are the best vehicles for moral growth. And these conflicts come at school, they come at home, they come between parent and child, with siblings. There are all sorts of daily conflicts. And if we, as adults, help children appreciate the moral implications of that, I think we'll be helping them along in this process.
Getting rid of one person that sells drugs is not going to help.
I think it is.
I think it'll help. What about all the kids that haven't started using drugs, and then if you don't put him away, then they'll get into drugs because he'll sell them? I mean, if you take him away, think about all the people that have not started drugs yet.
There's a lot of other people that will sell them drugs too.
But it's not going to stop. I mean, if you can just help out the situation, then you can help.
It's not going to stop, that's what it'll help.
Yeah.
One person can affect a lot of people. And if you get rid of that one person, then you're helping a little bit to save those people who could be influenced by him.
Psychologists study moral development by confronting adolescents with a moral dilemma.
Here's the story. Judy was a 13-year-old girl. Her mother promised her that she could go to a special rock concert coming to their town if she earned the money to buy a ticket. Judy managed to save up the money the ticket cost, but then her mother changed her mind and told Judy that she had to spend her money on new clothes for school. Judy was disappointed, and she decided to go to the concert anyway. She bought the ticket and told her mother that she hadn't saved enough money for new clothes, only a couple of dollars. So that Saturday, she went to the concert, but told her mother that she was at a friend's house. Her mother never found out what she did. Now, I'm wondering, Tim, what you think the problem in this story is?
Well, I think the problem was that Judy's mom decided not to let her go after she saved up the money.
Why do you think that's a problem?
Because Judy's mother broke her promise.
With maturity, the child begins to develop the ability to see both sides of a moral dilemma.
Well, there's two problems. One, that the mother broke her promise to her daughter, and the other one, that Judy lied to her mother.
Tim is a couple of years younger than Katie, and we still see some signs of this concrete exchange notion, what is owed to oneself in a relationship, rather than focusing on the importance of maintaining the relationship itself.
If they had a really close relationship, I don't know if her mother would have broken the promise to her, or that Judy would have lied to her mother.
Can we turn around and ask what a daughter should be concerned about in her relationship to her mother?
What do you mean by that?
Well, when Katie was asked to take her mother's point of view, to take a different perspective on the dilemma, she had some difficulty. She hesitated. And this reflects the difficulty that children and young adolescents have in stepping outside their own shoes. Younger people tend to be egocentric. And so making this transition is an important part of the moral reasoning process. You can't adequately solve any moral problem if you only consider your own point of view.
Where do you guys get your morals?
Where?
Yeah.
You're supposed to get them mostly from your parents, but I think I get mine like more from my friends now that I'm older. I mean, when I was little, I was like, whatever my parents say is just like a message from God or something. But now I depend like more on my friends, and I'm more influenced by my friends than I am by my parents.
There's a popular view that the values of adolescents are determined by their peers, that somehow parents and families disappear from the scene as the peer group takes over. In the case of families with ineffective parents, that may be the case. But in general, we find that the values of adolescents really quite closely approximate the values of their parents, the values that they've been experiencing during development.
You do get your morals from your parents, whether you like it or not. I mean, they're there, they influence you, even though if you don't want them to influence you, they're there, they give you the morals.
So you're saying right there that you trust your parents to give you good advice more than your peers?
Yeah, but you don't want to look like a fool in front of your peers.
Okay. Why not?
Because it's peer pressure. It's always been like that, and it always will be.
Your friends certainly aren't going to worry about your choice. It's up to you. And whatever choice you make is the one you'll have to live with, so you've got to choose that by your morals.
The end goal of the moral stage of development is twofold. One is to move people toward concepts of justice, truth, fair play, liberty, and so on as the basis of their moral thinking. The other piece is to help young people as part of the overall identity thing, which incorporates moral development, is to help people discover what has meaning for them, what has personal meaning for me. Never mind what my mom said, what my dad said, what my peers say, but what has personal meaning for me.
We all kind of don't want to hear about AIDS and drugs and alcohol. We just don't want to deal with it. We're just going to say, well, it's not going to happen to us. Just let those people handle it. But it's all of our problems. I mean, we all have to live and share in this world. And if we are to live together, then we have to kind of function as a effective society. And we can't just say it's the other people's problems. It's everybody's problems. It affects everybody. And we have to, not be shunned away from the horrible things in life. We can't just cast them away because they're not just going to go away. We have to do something about it.
The child advances dramatically during adolescence. While earlier experiences nourish this development, in many ways each boy and girl becomes a new person with a new mind and a new body, ready to tackle the challenges of adult life.